Welcome. So great to have you here. Is it on? It's just for there's a crew online, you see, so hence otherwise I wouldn't have the mic. But welcome to Creative HQ, and so great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I haven't met all of you, but no, great to be here. I think you all know why you're here, hopefully. But to hear a little bit about the experience of these three lovely humans who went through the GovTech Accelerator last year, I thought I might just start to set the scene, if you like, before we sort of dive in and start quizzing these guys. So the GovTech Accelerator and Creative HQ is a starting point. So Creative HQ, we are wholly owned by Wellington NZ, part of that local government framework. And our mission is to create an innovation hub here in Wellington. We work a lot with startups, but as my role, I'm the GM of Government Innovation, we also work with government. And we've got the privilege since about 2015, and I've been here since 2016, of working with a number of different organisations, most organisations, public sector organisations around town in some way, shape or form, and have worked on a lot of very, very interesting and innovative and creative projects. And really that's what drives us here, is about supporting government to be innovative, to be creative, and certainly that's what these projects that we're going to hear from tonight have been doing. In terms of the GovTech Accelerator, I've got a crook back, so apologies if I look old and decrepit.
Sorry, you're next to me.
Yeah.
You're going to shine.
Thanks, man.
You're going to shine.
What a guy. So what I thought is, as a starting point, is just give, in case people don't know, a bit of an overview of what the GovTech Accelerator actually is. So I draw sometimes a graph, and I was going to have a whiteboard, but they got this fandangled screen instead. It was better for the people online. So we're told. So to really just do a little bit of an overview of what the program is. So the way I explain it very succinctly, which I'm not good at doing, is this dot down here represents a problem that we have in government. And to solve said problem takes time and money. And through the process of solving a problem, creating a solution, a concept, a product, a service, whatever it might be, builds our knowledge in the process. What we generally do in government, it looks a little bit like this. We go away, we spend a bit of time researching it and building a bit of knowledge, and then we get to a point fairly on in that journey where we say, this is the decision that we're going to make about the end solution of what it is we're going to build, create, the service, the product. And then we spend the next 3 years and $3 million rolling out said solution. And get to the end and realise that our solution doesn't quite meet the needs of the community, the environment, the outcomes that we were trying to create. And that's because the decision was made early on in that process. So really what we're trying to do in the program is inverse that curve, and really spend a lot of time up front doing as much knowledge building as we can to get to a very different outcome. So it might still take 3 years and $3 million to execute the plan, but the difference is you've got a validated solution versus an unvalidated solution, one that actually meets the end user's needs, whether that's the environment, whānau, whether it's, someone down central Wellington, whatever it might be. And I suppose the process is a little bit about what we're going to hear about from these guys today and what they did and how they took their project through this process in a different way to create a different outcome that really, meets that end user's needs. And a couple of things just to point out on there is the reduced cost. I would argue that it's the cost of learning is significantly reduced by running this type of process. And I would also argue that it's a significantly less risky. The knowledge that you've created makes it less risky because your risk of building the wrong thing is dramatically decreased. And that's really the difference. So, people say innovation is risky. I would argue in a government context, through this type of innovation by method, it significantly reduces the risk of building the wrong thing and is a better use of all of our money as taxpayers. So yeah. Ka pai? Yeah, you guys do agree? Yeah. You don't disagree? All right, good. Otherwise, you're off. No. So just as a starting point, what we thought we'd do is just hear from the team here, and just to share a little bit about the problem that you came into the accelerator with, perhaps, and maybe very, very quickly, because it's a lot that they did, but a little bit about the problem and the project and where you are now, and perhaps that can frame up the rest of the discussion. Ka pai? Who wants to start? Down the line, Rob.
Kia ora tātou, ko Rob Deakin, aho. I'm the manager of the Resilience Work Programme at Toitū Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand. And as sort of the national geospatial mapping agency, we have a big interest in providing geographic information out to all sorts of users, but particularly emergency management, risk reduction is a key focus for us at the moment. Sort of long-term challenges around climate change and the impacts that will have has been driving focus for our work programs for a few years now. One of the key things we found over the years is that when we have been involved in supporting major emergency responses such as the Kaikoura quakes or the Canterbury quakes and rebuild and Pigeon Valley fire, is that scramble to get hold of the essential geographic information that people need to make good decisions about the response and recovery is always difficult, and it takes an awful lot of time and stress for people just to get their hands on that information. People are reliant on personal contacts, don't always know the information that they've got is reliable or the source of truth, and we fail to learn the lesson each time that something like that happens, and we start from scratch each time we're in that situation. So ourselves, along with National Emergency Management Agency, Police, Fire, Defence Force, have been thinking about how we can solve that problem collectively. So the problem we brought into the accelerator to us look at if we are going to get better coordinated around this and put in place long-term solutions to this problem, what would that look like, and how would we solve that problem? So that's about the problem that we were working with. The other part of the question was, where are we now? Okay, so we ran through the 12-13 week program, tested out assumptions about the problem. We got a lot of user feedback on actually clarifying that and validating some things and shining lights on areas that we had missed. We came up with sort of 5 solutions that we could focus on that would make things easier, and that might be technical, it might be training, it might be looking at agreements between organisations. And we were able to articulate those solutions in a way that made sense to senior managers, which was probably quite novel. And that's enabled us to move on with proof of concepts around those 5 solution areas that we're now building out with a view to moving on to more permanent solutions. So we've got a very good idea about the problem space. We've got good buy-in from stakeholders we worked with. We've got ideas about how we can solve that problem. I guess the next hurdle for us is getting commitment and funding for the long term to build those out. But we've got a much clearer idea about what solutions we can provide, and there's a lot more understanding of the problems and the benefits of solving those problems.
Awesome. Kira, thanks. It's not very loud? Without the mic? No, with. Got it. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is put down my wine, because I took it with my hands. And that could get really messy.
You're going to kick that, mate.
I am. It's going to be good, the comedy section. So kia koto, my name is Holly Norton. I work for the Sustainable Business Network, and I get to talk to you about the really sexy and exciting project of procurement, everybody's favourite topic. Procurement is actually way cooler than I ever realised before I was involved in it, and probably than you realise unless you already work in that exciting space. So the problem that we came across is that I've been working with Sustainable Business Network for some time with our procurement leaders group. So these are the big guys, the big companies who are trying their hardest to be sustainable. But what we learned along the way was it doesn't matter how fantastic your policies are, how bought in your leadership team is, when you go to market, if the solutions aren't there to buy, if there aren't sustainable options, then you're kind of screwed, to use professional language. But So the problem that we came into this program with is how do we actually help small to medium-sized businesses? We, as Sustainable Business Network, have this big network of 600-odd businesses who are looking for small and medium-sized suppliers to buy from. They want to buy from suppliers who meet their values around carbon, around waste, around modern slavery. But the problem was when you start talking to small, medium-sized businesses, which we did a lot through the program, we hadn't done before that, we needed to connect with them. We talked to about 60-odd organizations through the program, and we found out that most of them, so 95% didn't know what the word sustainable procurement meant, so that when somebody puts out an RFP or a tender and says, we want to buy this awesome thing and we want you to be sustainable, I don't know what that means. And B, that most of them actually are sustainable, but they just can't articulate it. You know, you start chatting to them and they're like, no, we don't do sustainable procurement. But then they start chatting about how they do flexible time for working parents and they love buying environmentally friendly products because it's better for their staff. And you're like, this is all sustainable. So what the toolkit does, and this is the solution we reached through the program, was we tried to design something that would help businesses be able to give something to their supply chains that help them understand how sustainable that they are already, help them articulate that in a way that will help them get into supply chains, that will help them win some of these contracts and effectively get money into these really cool, innovative, environmentally, socially sustainable businesses. And finally, what it helps them do is it identifies where they're not awesome yet, but simply what are the tools, what are the resources, what are the things out there that can help them? Because there's so many people out there, so many government departments, lots of which are involved in this process with us, who are doing awesome things to help these businesses, but most of them don't know where to find that support. So, yeah, that's where we've got to. We've got a big working group of a bunch of government departments, a bunch of big businesses, and excitingly, they've come together. They've written all the questions, which is what does best practice look like in all these areas. And my next job next week is to actually put all the data into the tool to start testing. So in about a month, it's going to be going live to some businesses, which is exciting, but not quite public yet. That's like the first round. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, kia ora everyone, I'm Sam Hoban. I work in MSD, Ministry of Social Development, and I work with a group of regional initiatives. One of them is Manaaki Tairāwhiti. And on the face of it, our problem was a much more basic one than everyone else's. We've got a group of navigators, people who work directly with families with complex needs. And they were spending an inordinate amount of time using really old-fashioned technology, basically spreadsheets, to collect what those families need and to relate that to decision makers locally. So we really our starting point was we just needed a piece of technology to move us past that and save a lot of time and just to move us into the 21st century, basically. And so I saw Johnny's sort of inverse curve graph there. I'm not sure if I've seen that before, but that really describes the process for us. That took us from feeling like we had a pretty straightforward problem, not really having the technical expertise at our disposal to work out what steps we needed to go through to solve that problem, and becoming part of a process that helped us along the way towards that. And it was really rewarding in that respect because I feel like we've gone from feeling like we had a basic, pretty simple problem to really digging inside the underlying things we were trying to achieve with the tech-based app that we're developing. So where are we now? We were one of the lucky recipients of some DIA funding, innovation funding, to keep the project going. And so we would have kept it going in some way, shape or form anyway, but this has enabled us to take a bit of a longer view and do the work properly. So we're going to launch and I can say this pretty confidently, we're going to launch a working prototype in about September, October of this year. I've got Moyes here, who if you want to catch up with afterwards, he can tell you a bit more about what that prototype will actually look like and do. But that's where we're at the moment. So thanks, Johnny.
All right. So while the focus of tonight isn't necessarily about the intricacies of these projects, because they are all pretty complex and there's a lot to them, but they are all pretty amazing. So I just thought I'm going to do my best to do a quick recap for anyone. Not that they fell asleep, but just as a quick recap so you know what you're dealing with. Lynn's project is looking at collecting data in emergency management situation. So emergency hits, everyone's got the right data at the right time. Fair? Okay, cool. Holly is around procurement, making sustainable procurement choices easier for government.
And business.
And business, yeah, true. And Sam's is, he says, the easiest, but it's actually the most complex in a way, because what they're doing is they had an amazing solution of delivering better services for whānau on the front line through Manaaki Tairāwhiti. But the problem was, how do we get that information back to policymakers back in, wherever they might be living? I don't want to say Wellington. Back to ministers, back to policymakers in real time in a way that they can use. Cool. So that's their projects. They're all really complex. There's a lot to them. It's very hard to get into what it is, but they've all taken a really novel approach and an interesting way of solving their solutions, and they're all sort of being implemented now, which is also great to see. So my first question I'd like to ask is around challenge. And, government is fraught with challenges. And one of those challenges I know for you, Rob, was around collaborating across the system. Is there something there you'd like to touch on around what was a challenge that you had coming into the program where you found that this type of model, our inverse curve, if you like, was supportive of you overcoming that?
Yes, so the challenges we are facing they're not new. But being able to articulate them in a way that makes sense probably has always been a challenge. So typically you've got a bunch of techies who have to deal with the problem of getting data and information out to people, and that's unseen and it's not tangible, and that articulation of the problem and the impacts that problem has on loss of time and decision making and what that means to people who are struggling. The translation of that problem into outcomes for people is often lost. So one of the things that we found was that we sort of had assumptions about what the problem was, but actually by going through that discovery phase and talking to about 26 individuals from different organisations who were all struggling with that problem, first of all, it validated some of what we knew. It also illustrated that a lot of the solutions we've thought at previously have been looking at how we deal with government organisations, but what about those people who need information that sit outside of local or central government? So that helped us to rethink about how we might address the solution. And I think the whole process of using that user-centric experience to test the assumptions that we'd got at a system level, but really to break that down to individual cases and see how that translated, just made the whole thing more tangible for people and also easier to design a more granular solution. So rather than try and bite or eat the whole elephant, it's what are the smaller things that you could do incrementally that would make a difference. And that's sort of the basis that we're going to move forward with, I think, because we can't do a big bang. People don't want a big bang, but what can you do in small steps that are going to be really helpful and make differences quickly? So,
one thing you touched on there was around experimenting, and experimenting in a government setting is something that's pretty challenging and often not done or not done well. Holly or Sam, how did you go about that? And perhaps was there a way in which you sort of perhaps ran an experiment or tested something with the user base that you might have found hard to do in sort of a BAU setting?
Yeah, my issue was a bit more elemental than that. It was actually picture a large sprawling organisation, MSD, which deals in tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of services and programs, and we're a sort of small innovative tack on to the side. So while what we're doing is of interest, what we're doing is not going to reach have the priority within the organisation to get what we want done. So really our problem was about getting the expertise in the first place around us, and a bit of a process, if you like, between here and Gisborne to get a project underway. So I don't know, does that answer what you were talking about? It was more I feel like we knew what we needed, and actually we needed it at an operational level. This wasn't some abstract need which which we were going to be, using sometime in the distant future. This was a real need to address people in the field working with families. So, and we just weren't getting any headway. We're getting a lot of in-principle support, a lot of understanding of what we wanted to achieve. But again, there's some really high bars you have to meet to actually get some expertise alongside you within an organisation. So that's where GovTech helped us out no end, really. Yeah.
And perhaps coming back to the challenges question, was there anything you wanted to touch on that? Was there any sort of big challenges that you had coming into the program, that you might have been...
Cool.
You want to touch on?
Yeah, I think one of our big challenges is what we were trying to create was effectively a change in a system of how you do things. So one of the reasons we chose to come into the GovTech program, even though the organisation I'm from is not government per se, is that we knew we had a project that had a whole load of different government stakeholders who needed to work together.
And you partnered with MBIE.
Partnered with MBIE, partnered with MFE, partnered with WorkSafe, a few different teams within MBIE. We've got some big organisations like MAS, so some big businesses involved in there. Forgive me if I've forgotten anyone. Amutai, Akina, there was this huge working group across basically government, charity sector and business. So really the GovTech process for us gave us a really neat formula where we knew we could test things, meet certain deliverables, report back to people, but it kind of gave that security of a way for us all to work together at speed. So I think that was really key. And then when you said in terms of experimenting, what I really love about the GovTech process is that there's a real big push on just getting out there, talking to real humans and testing things fast. So we did test some things, and not all of it went super well, but that was awesome. One of the things we're going to test this online tool, so we put a bunch of questions in a Google form, and we went out and tested them with a bunch of businesses. And most of them hated some of the questions that we'd written down and how we did it, but that gave us really key information so that next time we went out, we'd formatted things in a much better way, we'd simplified some of our language, and that learning's helping us make a really effective product now. Yeah.
Amazing. I'd like to sort of start thinking of questions, people. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask, and I'll fire off a couple more, but would love to hear from you all as well. What was some of the things that perhaps surprised you coming into the program? Was there anything that you were just taken aback by, or that really surprised you in a positive way, or in a negative way? But I'm biased towards being positive, perhaps. But yeah, anything there that you want to take off that perhaps was unexpected but created a better outcome than perhaps you would have otherwise achieved? Yeah.
I was surprised. As we went into the process, we had the 12 or 13 week roadmap there, so we sort of knew the phases of work we were going to go through. What really surprised me, I think, was the breadth and depth of experience in the coaching staff that were available to us. Facilitators there to help us out with making connections with Maori communities, or product owners, or people coming in from outside to help out with sort of communication, storytelling, the opportunity to pitch to Sibyl English in terms of, how do you articulate your problems in such a way that it's going to resonate with politicians. So having an ex-Prime Minister there, you really couldn't get much better than that. So I was really surprised about the quality of wraparound coaching and support that we got throughout the process.
You want to take us on that one?
Not so much a surprise, but it was just really nice to be involved in something where you were seeing how the next generation of workers operate, and the different tools they bring, the different skill sets, the different expertise, the different just ways of working. And I think one thing that GovTech did really well was pull this together and give some really meaningful... They seemed to find a way to bring it together in a way that drove the 12-week process forward. So I really feel like we could have... There were periods where we could have... say it's a 3-day period. That could have been the 3 months where your project sort of stalled and didn't go anywhere. But they had a way of kicking it on to the next stage. And I think that was really valuable for us. And just, I guess it was a lot of it, I wouldn't say foreign, but it wasn't what I encounter in my everyday work life. So that was really, it was fun, and it was useful for our project as well.
I'm just always surprised by the other teams. And I say always because I'd done one of these a few years ago, back in the early days of GovTech, and that's why I wanted to bring this specific project back, even though I was no longer in a government setting. And you tend to go into these things thinking that you know everything that there is to know about your subject matter. And I'm always surprised by the other teams in the space who are probably doing something a bit different or in a different space entirely, but the amount you learn from watching them go through that process as well. You know, there was other people using these customer-facing tech tools that we were learning from their insights. There were other people doing aspects of sustainability from Doc, and there's still bits that are coming up in other parts of my work where I'm like, oh, hey, I actually saw these guys were developing that. Let's link up. So that's always always a surprise. I thought this time I'd really nailed it, but no, still learning about that.
Nice. And we didn't actually get into the detail of how the mechanics of the program work, so sorry if any of that was not clear, but through the 13-week program, you know, the support from Creative HQ that the program provides is a lot of that wraparound support from a kairahi perspective, you know, from a innovation, skills perspective, product, business case writing, and sort of other elements in there as well, which were some of the things that they mentioned. Hey, if anyone in the room had a project in mind that they were thinking about, would it be suitable for the accelerator? What would be sort of any either advice or things that you would say make for a good fit in this environment? Yeah, blank faces.
It's not actually so much the fit. It's more that by definition, the project you've got, if you've not been able to progress it, you need some help. And that was very much our position. We needed help just getting our team together. So I guess my message would be, don't fixate on the bits you don't know and the uncertainty, because you'll get through that. If you feel like you've got a project that needs progressing and GovTech is taking an interest in you, just jump on board, because they will be able to help you in ways that, whether you're part of a big organisation or a small one, you won't be necessarily getting that support, or you won't be rising to the top of their, daily sort of priorities or whatever it is that you need to get attention. And I feel like that's what we got. And once we were here, it almost kind of, again, don't worry about the 12-week process. That kind of ran itself in a way. If you've got something to work on, it'll move through those stages. So, yeah, don't take all those many opportunities you'll get to say, oh, nah, let's just leave it this year. Just go for it, I think, is what I'd say.
If you've got a project that you haven't tested with the people who it's designed for yet, this is a really, really good way to do that fast and safely. Also, if you have a whole bunch of complex stakeholders who are all excited to work together, but it's hard to move fast with that many people, this is a really great structured process within which to do that. And if you think you've nailed the solution, probably worth testing it before you go live. It's a good way to do that as well. So.
It's called Accelerator for a reason, and that's because of those conversations with users and with stakeholders move along at pace. And I think the top tip for us, relative to some of the other teams who were in the process, 12 weeks isn't a long time. And before we started those 12 weeks, we already had good relationships established with people in other organisations that we knew we needed to work with. And we also had a pretty clear problem definition. And I don't think that was necessarily the case in all cases for all of the teams. So some teams were still struggling with their problem definition at week 5, week 6. So if you're thinking about putting a project through the process, as much as you can in terms of having the confidence that you have those relationships with stakeholders who are bought into working with you, get that box ticked early on, and really have a good think about the problem that you're bringing to the process, because that will save you time in what is a compressed time frame.
Just on the innovation process itself. So if you're not sure about the project or you're umming and ahhing, just the chance to go and learn all those innovation skills I keep finding so helpful in all the other projects that I'm dealing with since. So just give it a go and learn that stuff.
Amazing segue, because I was actually going to ask about something from a sort of professional development perspective as well. So, and you know, Holly, maybe that's your chance with the mic on that question, perhaps. But the other guys, you know, was there anything from a professional development perspective that was really beneficial for the program? Rob, you know, you've been around public service a long time. Could in 3 months, was there any tricks to an old dog could learn?
Well, I've been in public service for 10 years, but for 24 years before that, I've been in private sector. So very much used to dealing with terms of references, problem statements, and developing solutions for clients, and building up ideas that you will sell or pitch and hopefully win contracts to and deliver. I think what this taught me that was different was really that much closer connection to users whose problems you are trying to solve. So rather than getting a tender through from a government department that says we want X, it's actually getting underneath that and getting to the heart of the problems in a much more tangible way. So that's that real user-centric approach to problem discovery and solution design was new to me, and this is somebody who's been designing solutions for a long time before I came into a long time in the public sector. So you can teach an old dog new tricks, and there are it just illustrates there are probably quicker and different and sometimes better ways to crack a nut, I think.
Any other comments on that one? Holly, you can as well.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it's fine. No, it's cool.
Look, I don't know if this is going to sell the program to other retiring sort of folk like me, but one of the things you get forced into doing stuff, and so one of the things I had to do was I think I had to do at least one pitch. I'm sitting here, I wouldn't have, this is not the sort of thing I normally do, so things like that are actually really good, and it's never too late to do new stuff, so that was great. Looking back, really useful.
You can talk to me afterwards about design and stuff, but the only thing I would add to that is it's actually shaped my whole role going back into my organisation. So I'm now mostly focused on regenerative design and innovation in the sustainability work I do. So invaluable learning for me personally.
Yeah. Now, hey team, do I have to pass the mic out to anyone asking a question, or can they just fire it? I can repeat it if need be. Hey, yeah. All right. Oh, Can I sort of fire it to your direction? James.
Yeah, you're right, James. Mark also with Venue like Rob. Also got a project trying to get in this year, and I'm interested in the sort of more nuts and bolts about the team dynamic. So selecting a team to go in, because we have to get a multidisciplinary team from different agencies, that sort of thing. But what sort of people and their behaviours, their generation, their skill sets, or whatever fit well in this environment?
Big mix.
Yeah, I could talk a lot, but what do you guys think about that?
I think team dynamics is critical, and we have a relatively small core team. I think there were 4 of us on our team from Toitū Te Whenua. Working mostly full time, except for that gentleman who, due to COVID, was working 24 hours a day. On something else, and sometimes on what we were doing as well. So, team dynamic. If you recognise the fact that the people you put into this accelerator are here for a 12-week period and need that time to work effectively, and try and take as much else off them as possible. For us, we didn't put a lot of time and effort into thinking about who we would select for the team. We chose people who were available, which is often. But there is the sort of a team profiler tool that we did use. So it did mean right at the very start of the project we understood each other's preferences for how we worked and ways of working, and that is always helpful. But also, I think the thing that we found greatly supportive is, although we had a core team of 4 people, we also had a stakeholder group of another dozen people that we were meeting with on a weekly basis, and they were bringing their thoughts and their expertise to help guide us. And it was a delight to be able to put together a new team from scratch, and I think part of that process was made easy and pleasurable by the environment that was created here for us by the Creative HQ staff.
Basically, you want a really big mix of perspectives and ideas in that team if you want to get the best results. So if you had 4 people like me on a team, you'd have a very loud, terrible time. You want, someone who, and Creative HQ takes you through this process at the beginning, thinking about what type of kind of founder personality that you are. But, it's great to have one big ideas person, the kind of hero personality, but it's also fantastic if you pair that person with someone who's a real deep data person or someone who really understands the topic. And then maybe someone who can black hat a little bit and ask the tricky questions, and somebody else who's a little bit more risk-taking. Getting that real interdisciplinary mix is going to bring the magic. And what Creative HQ does is actually really helps you and has leadership coaches. Is that what we call them? Yeah, people that kind of help you navigate that too, because it can be tricky when you have very different personality types, but it also gets the best result from what I've seen.
I'll keep this brief because I'm not sure it's going to address your question really, but we didn't even have that luxury. We didn't have a team, so we didn't have the developers, the actual tech people who were going to build this for us, and that's what Creative HQ, that was the very first thing they helped us with. And then I actually don't know if the dynamic was really was going to ever be. It never arose as a problem, and I think that was partly because the GovTech process diluted it, perhaps drew people out of their sort of personality types or whatever it was, got them to do new stuff. So it didn't let people sort of kind of how would you put this, go back into sort of their own ways of working, if you like. But the really delightful thing for me about our particular project is that we actually needed to bring in 2 of the Gisborne-based staff who are the navigator supervisors, who are really going to be at the coalface of using what we're doing. They were reluctant. They were down in the weeds. They don't, they're too busy. But I think they've really embraced the whole process, and now they're actually, I think, leading the sort of build phase, apart from the techie stuff that Moyes is doing, of the project. So that's been a real, that's been fantastic to see for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a mix there, of hard and soft skills, definitely. Oh, yeah.
So talking about those external developers and those external skills that are required, like how does that work? Obviously Creative HQ facilitates it, but do you then have to find those people within your own organisation, or can you go to external suppliers, or how does that work?
So that question was just around, if you didn't hear, if you've got a skill shortage on your team, and Creative HQ facilitates a process, but how do you go about, or how can we support perhaps finding a person to sort of fill that gap? And I think, Sam touched on it at the start with their project. I won't put words in your mouth, but I was involved in that process, so I know a little bit about it. And that was, they said, hey, we don't have a developer, and we really wanted actually some on-the-ground people in Tairāwhiti as well. So actually what we ended up doing for that particular project was that we used our network here in Wellington to find a senior developer in Moyes who's still involved in the project, and he came on as a contractor. But they were really cognizant that they wanted long-term to build the skill base of Tairāwhiti as well. So we actually also hired, as contractors, it was actually through Creative HQ, but to the project, 2 junior developers who had just finished Inspiral Dev Academy based in Gisborne, and they joined the Tairāwhiti-based team to go through the process and sort of had the mentorship of Moyes, a more senior developer here in Wellington as well. So that was one way of doing it. Yep.
Yeah, our skills shortage, I guess, was in terms of that user experience designer. So Creative HQ were able to hook us up with 3 potential people who could come into that role, and we luckily got one of them. So that was great. We weren't doing any hard development through the 12-week period, but we wanted to know what was possible, and we were able to rely on, I guess, on some of the development skills that we had in our team from the techie guys who were on that project. But certainly that ability to fill the gap in terms of the user design was something Creative HQ helped out with.
Yeah, it was pretty much exactly like Johnny said it. Walking around the corridors of MSD, I mean, the job title developer had become almost a mythical sort of being because I couldn't find any of them. I knew they existed, and so I was sort of conditioned to thinking we wouldn't find anyone. So having, Johnny and Jenny and Bernie, they basically brought in their networks and found it for us, and that was, that set us up on a really good footing with GovTech because they'd done something very tangible for us before we'd even started the project.
Yeah, so the question was around how do you measure success, and it's a good one because these projects that they're dealing with are often longer term projects. The outcomes they're trying to create are system change type initiatives, and it can be longer. But one thing that we do, and I'll just sort of say from my perspective, and then pass over, is around looking at what does success mean for this particular project, because there's no one catch all. So before the program starts, we sit down with the sort of sponsor, if you like, from the agency to say, what are some success criteria that could look like at the end of three or 4 months? It might be, in Rob's case, I won't speak for you, sorry, Rob, but it was around collaboration. How do we create better collaboration across the sector of X, Y, and Z agency? We want to have a strong relationship. And each project is different, but we go through a process of working out that success criteria right up front, because the project continues, and I think I can throw you a stat and say 65% of projects or something it is are still going after 2 years after going through this program, but actually that doesn't necessarily indicate success because some of them are still working towards their outcome. Some projects, Jenny here tonight actually worked on a project a couple of years ago that was done within 3 months of finishing the accelerator. It was all tied up, in a bow, so to speak, and was sort of parked complete. So it's not still active, but it was successful. So it can be quite difficult. But that's one way we do it. Do you guys want to?
Yeah, and I think it's true that the measure of success will be different for each of the projects that ran through. For us, it was around building that collaborative network for people that we knew we'd be able to work with going forward. But also for me, it was having that commitment from my organisation that they were prepared to continue investing in trying to solve a problem, and to do that they needed to clearly understand what that problem was and then the types and scale of solutions that we could do. So for success it was that commitment to continue to support the work, because senior managers knew there's a problem there, but what's the solution? They needed something tangible to relate to so that they could make that decision about whether or not it was something they were interested in pursuing.
The only thing I'd add to that is that there's a lot of support in the program if you want it for pushing to get to the goals that you have set, particularly when they come to buy into the next stages. So in our case, we came in and said we want all these stakeholders agreed on where we're going, we want the funding, and we want to know what the pathway looks like. And boy, did they hold us to that every meeting, and a lot of coaching on how to get there. But it was really appreciated. So we came out of the project with most of the funding that we needed, a core team, and we knew what the next 6 to 9 months were going to look like for us, which I think was the really critical bit.
Just really quickly, a bit of what both my colleagues have said. I'd just add that I don't think any of the very few of the projects will come out of the 12 weeks with a working, in our case, a working prototype or whatever it is they're trying, a website that's gone live, whatever it is that you're aiming towards. But I actually personally felt like I looked at all eight of the projects, and they went from sometimes lack of clarity to enormous clarity over those 12 weeks, or elements of each of the projects probably weren't that convincing, but they got that got sort of beaten out of them, I guess, if you like. And so success for me, we will have a prototype out of this, and I don't think we would have got there, and we wouldn't have had as good an end outcome without this 12-week process. I don't know if that's your kind. It's really, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to know how many can go back to their departments and say, here's what we promised, here's where we've got to after 12 weeks. But I think if you're willing to sort of dive down a bit into what you were trying to achieve, you'll be able to demonstrate you've had some pretty good outcomes.
Yeah, look, I think we're not a Māori organisation, but the program and I think the sentiment of what we want to do is very much from being a good treaty partner and making sure that that's at the root of it, and we have a kairahi who can support through the program, but really I think would require that skill set to be brought if a project was needing to take that approach from the start. It was completely fundamental to whatever that project was, and I don't know what it is. I think we would definitely push to make sure that skill set was on the team, and really that the project makeup was done in a way that would be a key ingredient, and we can sort of support and facilitate through that, but certainly it's not our sort of core skill set, although something we're hugely supportive of and try and bring where we can. And there's lots of different ways we can do that and help with. But, yeah. 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 So how much time to spend in the program from a staff perspective, I guess the question was. So we really say that it's as close to full-time for 12 weeks as possible for the core team. And if you've got a core team of 2 people, it's very hard. And if you've got a core team of more than 5, it actually also starts to get very hard, because we really try and create a project team which is sort of 3 to 4 people is great if like full time, and that creates an environment where we really try and make it, no hierarchy. There's no project lead in this environment is what we try and strive for, and really everyone takes ownership of that project and drives for the outcome. And but anyway, I'll pass over to you guys for anything to add there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us the ideal size of the team would have been that 4 people with the support from the working group that we were getting, and certainly be prepared to give those 4 staff, if that's the number, nothing else to do for that 12-week period but to dedicate themselves to this process, because stuff does move at pace, and even if you're out the office for 2 or 3 days, then things have moved on or things have stopped happening because of that, and you can't afford that loss within that time period. We lost a member of staff part way through. They moved on to a different organisation, and we were very fortunate that we could almost do a like-for-like swap with very like, same names, two Jameses. And I think it's fair to the individuals that you put into that environment to give them the time that they need to dedicate to that, because you're expecting outputs from them within a 12-week period, which is pretty short. Then please be considerate of them and let them get on with it.
Just going to say it depends how much you want to get involved in the social life of the program as to how many hours you need to commit. But in all seriousness, there is a very cool cohort energy that goes on. And there's always going to be a few crazy people who are here to 10 o'clock because they're crazy passionate about it. But there is quite a good culture of people telling each other to go home if you're past 5:30. But there's also a really cool energy of people going out. We did a lot of bingo upstairs. We did a few Friday drinks. A few people even went on holiday together after the program. So it's a great way to also meet a whole bunch of people. Yeah. There's some great karaoke at the end of program. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so the question was just around, is this environment a good one to cement a good team culture if it was a new team who had recently been formed, and create a good working style?
Yeah, from our perspective, there were 4 of us on the core team. None of us knew each other. None of us had worked together previously. And it was a very good environment, particularly through the first couple of weeks where you're going through a lot of, I guess, team building and coaching exercises and just defining the way that you want to work with each other. So it was an excellent environment to build and bond a team, I would say. Can't stand them now, but no, I think I am very much joking. It was a great experience, not just for being as part of a team of 4, but actually being as part of 8 teams of 4 collectively as a cohort was great.
If your question is, can it be an induction or almost like a new grad sort of a project, then I actually think as long as the project's a good one, yeah, definitely. You can make of it what, I don't think it needs old hands or, no, good idea.
The only risk with a whole bunch of new people is they don't know what's not possible. So, yeah, exactly. It's a good thing.
So, yeah, we often have, a real range of people who have been in their career for 40 years and are absolute, subject matter experts all the way through, smart young grads as well. So, any other last questions? Huh?
We had 6. Well, maybe it was 7. I'm just trying to think. It was, it's all good.
We had 2.5, but a stakeholder group of 17. So there's ways to do it in different ways.
Yeah, I guess it would be, completely related to the project and the different skill sets that are required. But
and I'm sure if we'd had a 5th member, things would have worked equally as well. But I think to the point about having too large a team, that's probably probably a challenge as well.
yeah, if someone came and said we had a team of 8, we wanted to put in, I'd suggest we recut it. But yeah, no, nothing online, Milu? No, ka pai. All right. Well, was there any last dying statements from any of you? You really wanted to get off your chest, put the boot in while you can? No? Oh, I guess just to close there then, I do want to sort of acknowledge this program is really well supported from a number of different organisations. Westpac Government Innovation Fund are really supportive of this initiative and the approach that we're taking, which has been really great to have them on board for this the 2nd year that they've been on board. We've got Productivity Commission that are supportive. We've got a developer across the road called Endgame as well, and also Wellington NZ. They're really committed to seeing Wellington be a global leader of public sector innovation, and this program is only one small part of that, hopefully, but it is part of that. And we're really passionate about helping public sector to become more innovative and creative. So, we sort of thank Wellington NZ for their support in that as well. But look, please do hang around. Come and ask any of these guys any questions, anything. I'm sure they'll be willing to tell you any ugly truths. I'll be hanging around. Also, Milu, who's at the back, giving us a wave. She is the fantastic program manager this year and was involved last year. Thank you, Milu, for everything that you do. You're amazing. So she'll be hanging around as well to ask her questions. And actually Jenny is here next to her from the Westpac Government Innovation Fund as well. And they offer different sort of, they can support in different ways. They tackle them for some money or something, No. But yeah, other than that, I think, thank you so much for coming along and look forward to talking afterwards. Ka pai?